Welcome back to RGO Photo. I'm Chris. We're continuing on with our budget full frame setup. We're at the $500 price point right now, and we've got three really good options today. So we've got one from Nikon and we got two options here from Canon. Obviously, you can find other lenses and things in this price point to go along with these bodies and you can have more options, but these are the ones that I have and have availability to me. So let's check them out. Let's start with the Nikon D600 and the NIKKOR AF-S 24-85 3.5 to 4.5 G. The interesting thing about this lens to me is it only covers 2/3 of a stop between 24 and 85. So when you go from there, if you are shooting wide open, boom, you roll it all the way from 24 to 85. You've only got to compensate 2 clicks on the shutter speed, 2 clicks because I have it set up on 1/3 of a stop. So you rotate your focal length, your aperture drops 2/3 of a stop, you crank your shutter 2 clicks, and boom, you're back to the same exposure. So it's not near as big as, say, the Canon OG that I like so much, the 28 to 80. That goes from 3.5 to 5.6, so that's 1 1/3 stop, and that's twice as much as this one. So if you crank that one from 28 to 80, you would have to go 4 clicks on your shutter speed, and then you might getting into trouble depending on if you're already borderline on your shutter speed that you want anyway. So 2 clicks is a lot better than 4 clicks. So let's start with this bad boy and let's take a look at some of the photos with this. Alright, so here we have our focal point is here. You see, nice and clear, nice and crisp. And I pulled the shadows up in here, and that's more of a function of the camera than the lens, but anyway, I think the black background blur looks pretty good. So let's go to the next one. Here we are, the Continuum, the Julie Penrose Memorial Fountain, and the focal point is back over here. As you can see, nice and clear, nice and crisp. The corners seem to have maybe a little bit of vignette in them, but not too bad. Kind of an architectural photograph in a 1:1 format. Here's a close-up of a sunflower, and those mountains in the back are several miles back there. Probably, maybe only 2 as the crow flies, but you can see the lake in the background, maybe a little underexposed, or a lot depending on your taste. Here we have a portrait of a llama. And again, nice, good, sharp, right there in the middle. The background blur on this one I'm not crazy about, but maybe that's slightly overexposed in the background. But that's a lot of aspens and pine in the background. And that is a solid mile from the llama. So it's back there a good ways. Another llama. You can see a lot of detail here in the hair, even though it's a real dark. It's dark on dark. The subject is very dark on a dark background. And here's that mountain backdrop. I shot this at f8, and you can see all these trees back here. You can see all the individual trees. Again, that's at least a mile back there, maybe 2. Alright, so now we're going to switch to the Canon 6D with the 40mm f2.8 prime STM, which is a pancake lens, very small, and this has a filter on it, so it's not even that tall in real life. Very small lens right there. So let's take a glimpse at a few of these photos. Here we have those scooters, and I took a shot of this because I thought this one is out by itself, facing the wrong way. Not a ton of background blur because the focal point here is quite a good ways from the camera, so the background isn't that blurry. But up close, this being my focal point, we have a lot of background blur, and I think the background blur looks pretty good. Can't complain for a $120 lens right there. And another faux portrait of a fire hydrant. This is a Catholic church in the background. Crooked stop sign that's not too far back. Nice and crisp. The blur is nice in the background. Pretty nice lens too. Next series of photos we're going to look at is with the Canon 6D and the 28 to 135 IS USM lens. I like this lens a lot. It punches well above its price point, as you'll probably hear me say, or gloat over this lens quite a bit. For the, I think I got 130 in this lens. Bargain, absolute bargain. So anyway, let's take a look at the photos. Here we got a sunflower, and because this lens has a pseudo macro function, it's not a macro lens, but it's got real good close focusing. You can get real tight, and look how sharp this is in there. Look how sharp. Nice background blur too. I think it does a pretty good job. I see like a little ghosting or something back here, weird right here, but usually it does a pretty good job. Now this was shot in just JPEG, and I touched it up just a little bit, but for some reason the camera wasn't on RAW and JPEG. But this is a sunrise in Florida. Again, with that sort of macro function, you can see blurry foreground, a thin band of focus right on the robin egg, and then going out of focus. There might be a little bit of goofiness down here, but overall, real nice job. Here we got a 1x1 framing of my faux portraits, as I like to call them. Nice, good in focus. Pleasing black background blur in my opinion, very nice. Good colors too. Again, I took this shot mostly just to look at the colors, because this playground is kind of crazy, but the focus point is back here on the continuum. You can see how sharp that is through here, and the shutter speed was fast enough to freeze this truck on the highway. So this is up close and blurry. I think that looks pretty nice. A nice blur. Again, I took this shot, get a nice shot of this fire hydrant, nice and clear right there, nice and crisp. And then I think it's got a pleasing transition as it goes out of focus the further back you go. And good colors. Here's another sunflower. This is in the background, this is a fence, a wooden 6-foot privacy fence that's stained a real kind of a nice color. And again, look nice and sharp in here with that close focusing ability with that lens. Nice colors. Another shot of the continuum. Nice and crisp back in here at the focal point. It's going to be a slightly blurrier up front here. I don't know how big the diameter of this thing is, but from the focus point to this might be 30 feet difference. So it's a pretty good chunk of distance. So that's my examples for a $500 full frame setup. Hope you're getting something out of this. I'm kind of doing this series of videos to kind of show you don't have to put a second mortgage on your home to get a good camera. I know it's all the rage to get the latest and greatest mirrorless cameras, and it's not that they're bad cameras or anything like that, but these were used by, and probably still are somewhere. Someone's still using these as a pro photographer, getting paid work with these cameras. Now, probably they got better lenses than I'm showing you here at this price point, but there's nothing wrong with these bodies. And if you upgraded to their pro level lenses, you still wouldn't have a whole lot of money in these comparatively to a modern mirrorless camera. Now, do I want the Canon R6 Mark II to come out, or Mark III to come out? Yes, because I'm hoping that drives the original R6 prices down to a point where I will want to buy it, because having in-body stabilization and a flippy screen, that kind of excites me. But anyways, I think the files that come out of the 6D and the D600, as well as the 5D Mark II that we showed in the previous video, I think they all hold their own today. They were great cameras then, they're still great cameras now. It's just they're not new and happening and getting all the press right now, but oldies but goodies. So anyway, that's kind of the point behind these videos. You don't have to spend a ton of money, especially if you're just getting into photography. You don't have to spend a ton of money to get a full frame camera, which is again all the rage. I'm a big fan of micro four thirds as well, and we'll get into some of those videos at some point. But to get a full frame camera, to get started in a hobby you may or may not even like. So why would you spend $4,000 on a lens and a body of the latest and greatest gear when you can get this awesome older gear, and it's not gonna break your heart and break your bank account? And if something happens to them, or they get stolen or dropped or whatever, in most cases, if you just drop it, they're probably the bodies for sure will probably survive. The lenses, depending on how they get dropped, may or may not survive, but you're not out a ton of money because you dropped your expensive camera. So anyways, hope you like this video, hope you like these series of videos. If you did, give us a thumbs up. Hit the subscribe button down there if you would, please. And as always, thanks for watching.